Overview. Building strong, deep, meaningful relationships is no easy task. It requires constant effort, careful speech, and sometimes inevitable conflict. In Connect 2021, David Bradford and Carol Robin explain how to build an exceptional relationship. They tell several stories of different relationships, then draw conclusions and establish ground rules for connecting deeply with friends, family, and coworkers. A learning mindset. Relationships exist on a continuum, as they have the ability to grow from regular to exceptional if you choose to put in the effort. Keep in mind that exceptional relationships are not a destination you reach, and that's it, because a relationship can always grow deeper, and it needs your constant care in order to keep flourishing. Connect is based on a famed course taught at the Stanford Graduate School of Business by David Bradford and Carol Bradford, a married couple. The course, Interpersonal Dynamics, was nicknamed Touchy-Feely by the students. It was designed to help students learn through engagement, putting the material into practice in their personal relationships. As a relationship gradually grows, it equally becomes more complex. Responsibility and obligations toward the other grow larger, and the potential topics of conflict may grow too. You learn how to deal with these challenges and conflicts, and as a result, your relationship becomes stronger. It is crucial to adopt a learning mindset, where your mind is always open to new experiences and ideas. You also need to learn to accept failure as a learning opportunity that will help you forge new relationships. Testing the waters. Building a strong relationship is like climbing Mount Washington. The climb gradually gets harder, and you have to help each other get through the difficult parts to reach the beautiful destination. There's always a high risk of being misunderstood whenever you disclose something personal, but it's necessary to take that risk if you're going to strengthen a relationship. Fear of judgment is inevitable in this case, but you must face it. Conversation can be grouped into 3 concentric zones that determine how often a topic will lead to a negative outcome. The smallest ring is the safe zone in the center. The large outer ring is the danger zone. The middle ring is the learning zone. It's tricky to grow a relationship without endangering it. One method is to apply the 15% rule to the 3-zone concept. This rule states that taking the conversation outside the safe zone by 15% into the learning zone will help you test the waters without much risk. However, the 15% rule is still subjective and relative to the specifics of each conversation. You must determine how the other person is responding before sharing even 15% more. Moreover, the most vulnerable period in relation to disclosure is when you are particularly unsure about the consequences of your revelation. You will feel far less vulnerable if you have shared something personal in similar situations several times and have a strong understanding of how others will react. It is particularly important for leaders to not be too closed off into themselves. By sharing, leaders create a safer space for the team to be more comfortable, and hence more vulnerable, which leads to stronger connections. When we choose to hide a certain side of our life, we often cover up other aspects related to it as well, which distances us further from strengthening the bond with others. Disclosure will increase your chances of establishing trust, winning acceptance, and building the kind of relationship you want in the long run. It's a process, and you need to have faith in it. Disclosure and empathy. You don't have to have been in the same situation as a person telling you a story to be able to empathize with them. For example, if the person is angry about a situation you've never been in, at least you know what anger feels like. You must first try to comprehend someone else's viewpoint in order to connect with them. Once that link is established, it is feasible to discuss further topics and ask more questions. Your questions may become inauthentic if you start testing a hypothesis you've created about the story a person is telling you. Instead, you must be genuinely curious and open-minded to encourage more disclosure. Giving advice is generally not useful, even if the person asks for it. Often, the person is just seeking some empathy or thinking out loud. Since you're not in their shoes, sticking to listening is your best bet for actually helping the person. Empathetic statements are very useful because they reflect the other person's feelings, which encourages them to disclose more. It is also very important to give the other person space to share by not asking too many questions and getting out of line. Status differences may play a big role in how much disclosure there is in a conversation. The lower status party is less likely to share in a workplace, for example. It's difficult for employees to achieve openness with a boss. As much as self-disclosure is advantageous, it is important to always set boundaries in situations where too much of it might damage the relationship rather than strengthen it. Balance of influence. An essential component of relationship balance is the cycle of continuous self-disclosure, support, and trust. Finding a point where both parties are content is difficult, but it is possible if you comprehend how the give-and-take relationship between the two people works. There are two main things a couple needs to do to keep a relationship balanced over time. The first is to keep in mind that each person must be clear about what they want, so that they are aware of each other's needs and can reach a consensus where both are satisfied. Reassessing your relationship is the second step in rebalancing. Needs and preferences change along with the environment. People risk preventing both their own and their relationship's growth when they become stuck in old commitments. If you don't step up your commitment when conflicts develop, you'll be less likely to have a positive outcome, which will make it more difficult to commit going forward in the relationship. However, do not avoid conflict when it arises, because that is never the solution. It should be handled with proper care and mutually agreed paths to resolution, even if that means unpleasant and exhausting arguments. Crunches and pinches. Never hold back your emotions from the person you're annoyed with. It will eventually grow into resentment and anger, turning a small issue into a big deal. You need open, honest communication to address contentious issues that one party in the relationship might be overlooking. Pinches are the small situations that bother us. We often decide not to bring them up for three main reasons. First, we fear that we will look thin-skinned. Second, we think it might make things worse. Third, we assume the person involved wasn't aiming to harm us. Some pinches fade away when ignored, but others don't. Instead, they grow into crunches. You're not just annoyed, you feel anger and resentment, and you develop a negative opinion of the other person. As pinches turn into crunches, we seek negative evidence to confirm them. It's best to address pinches before this happens. Humor can be used as a functional way to point out a pinch, but you must be careful before using it. Consider the setting, the strength of the relationship, and how much sense of humor the other person has. Feedback breeds winners. When two people interact, there are three different realities involved: their intent, their behavior, and the impact of their behavior on each other. It's important to use behaviorally specific feedback. When you state how the other person's behavior made you feel without assuming their intent, it leaves no room for them to dismiss that feedback. When giving feedback, we need to stick to our own reality and feelings instead of throwing accusations. When you do this, along with increasing your self-disclosure, you are more likely to achieve your desired outcome of changing the other person's behavior, while increasing the chances of them self-disclosing. Watch out for the trap of the feedback sandwich, where we start by saying something positive about another person, state a negative, and then say something positive again. We use the feedback sandwich to soften the blow, but people usually see through it and become defensive. The feedback sandwich is seldom a useful strategy because it is not behaviorally specific. When you find yourself getting defensive after a negative comment, acknowledge it and ask what triggered it. Once you do this, however, you need to move on and not dwell on it. Negative and positive. Sometimes we feel like we shouldn't be feeling a certain way, believing that our emotions are wrong. But feelings are never wrong. What might be wrong is the cause we attribute to them or the way we express them. We may sometimes feel that our emotions contradict each other in a certain situation, and so we restrain from expressing them. Instead of repressing them, we should express both the negative and the positive we're feeling. When addressing an important issue with someone, there are 4 major stages. First, get the other person to take the problem seriously. Second, ensure that they share everything concerning the problem on their side. Third, aim for a mutually acceptable solution. Fourth, and last, determine if the relationship needs work. When we receive feedback, we tend to get defensive. We should learn how to acknowledge that feeling, but not act on it. Keep an open mind and try to learn from it. When you're giving feedback on someone's behavior, wishing them to change, don't give up at the first denial from them. Instead, be sure to make your point very clear and precise. Taking the risk. The more you understand your emotions, the more you have options to use them constructively, and the less likely you are to let them control you. It's often thought that sharing your emotions is a sign of weakness, but it's been observed again and again that by sharing emotions the right way, people build the best relationships, whether at work, with friends, or at home. Being open and vulnerable during conflict can be challenging, but it's necessary if you want to remove barriers and foster mutual trust. Others could be more ready to express their sentiments to you if you can be emotionally transparent with them. Useful conflict. You are more likely to make informed decisions when you are aware of your emotions. During conflict, if you identify your emotions, describe them precisely, and stick to them as your reality instead of throwing accusations, you are more likely to end up with a fruitful outcome. Conflict can be really challenging. We fear conflict because of the exhausting arguments, accusations from both sides, and the effort it demands. You need to leave space for others to open up about what might be at the core of the issue, while also staying transparent and authentic. It is also very important to know when to take a break from an argument. That doesn't mean dropping the issue and giving up on the relationship. It means taking some time to gain perspective and regain energy after the exhaustion conflict brings. Solving problems. Avoid jumping to conclusions, thinking in terms of either or, and debating over solutions. Instead, concentrate on needs when resolving a problem. Deep, long-standing issues are frequently at play when one or both parties refuse to give up on a subject. These issues must be brought up and examined during the debate. Judgmental labeling can be avoided by being aware of how much our past influences us. It's not the best idea to turn to a third party to seek help in a relationship, because that person doesn't have all the information about the two parties. They can only be useful in that they can help you gain clarity around the issue so that you figure it out yourself. It takes persistence, competence, and dedication to bring up problems and work together to discover solutions. The bigger the conflict, the more time it needs to get resolved. expectations, and limits. Relationships are both exhilarating and difficult. That is because they don't have a perfect end result. It's not always easy to deal with the possibility of ongoing growth and development, but it's also a big part of what makes exceptional relationships seem so amazing. In a relationship, it is important for each person to be tough and be able to say no to a request that demands a lot. But be really careful in doing so, because it might jeopardize the relationship if done in the wrong situation. Even if a relationship has reached an exceptional stage, it still has the capacity to grow further. Leaning into difficult discussions is much more worth it when both sides are very committed to the relationship and have built competencies over time that help them overcome conflict more productively. Complicated issues. It can be quite challenging to keep your personal experience apart from how you are responding to a friend's story when it happens to be similar to something in your life. Above all, be direct and honest about what you're feeling while also acknowledging their feelings. You need to be clear and draw the line between being empathetic with your friend about their situation and decision and being supportive of it. There's a difference between making sure your friend is heard and understood and agreeing and supporting their decision. When talking about problems with your friends and family, you need a growth mentality. Though it can be challenging, living a fulfilling life requires getting into the realm of exploration. To have an exceptional relationship, you must be willing to examine problems, accept the risk of making mistakes, and take into account fresh new perspectives. The likelihood of alienating the other person increases as we exert more pressure on them to share more. Instead, sometimes meeting someone where they are enhances the likelihood that they'll join the adventure later. Author style. Carol Robin and David L. Bradford's writing flows easily. They use plenty of real-life and hypothetical examples, along with some graphic elements to help readers understand and engage with the material. At the end of each chapter is a section of activities to help readers think back on their own relationships and how they're applying what they're learning. Author's perspective. Carol Robin and David L. Bradford taught interpersonal skills to MBA candidates for a combined 75 years at Stanford. They also coached and counseled hundreds of executives for decades. They are now retired and are still happily married. We hope you enjoyed the insights on David Bradford and Carol Robin's Connect. Purchase the book to learn more.